Hey guys, I have a couple minutes. I'm going to make a quick video here, and I plan on going into a ton more depth on inflation and savings rates and all this sorts of stuff. But just to give you like a really quick takeaway, you don't really need to worry about inflation that much in terms of the number that's published by the government. And the reason why is this. Number one, if you're trying to look at it over a long period of time, they've changed what actually goes into inflation, like what basket of goods and services. So it's really not apples to apples anymore, so you can't really draw comparisons over like long periods of time. Second reason is because basically any agency who's putting an inflation metric together, they're assuming a basket of goods and services, and that might not be what you actually spend your money on. Or it might not be basically the proportion of spending that you spend your money on. So what's actually way more helpful is if you track your own spending every year, and then you can actually track the changes in both your volume as well as the prices of those goods and services that you're spending on. And then you'll actually know what your personal inflation rate is. And that is so important because when you're investing, everyone understands this concept of compounding returns and how great that is. But what people don't understand is whenever you take out a loan or you're just exposed to inflation, there's compounding returns of that loan or inflation working against you all the time. And so if you actually have a better picture of your inflation situation, that's going to really change how your investing strategy works, because you might be able to take less risk, or you might have to take more risk in order to, basically keep up with the inflation rate that you're exposed to. Okay. And then the second thing is that, savings is great, but it's really more about expenditure. And what I'm going to tell you is pretty crazy if you've never thought about it before. But basically, wealth is really not a measure of income. Wealth is really a measure of expenditure. And what I mean by that is simple. So let's say you have two people, right? And they're both making $100,000 after tax per year, just for simple math. One of them spends about $66,000 a year on expenditures, rent, car, everything. The other one spends $50,000. So one of them spends 66. They're able to put away, let's say, roughly 33. So every single year, they put away 33, and their expenditure is 66. So every single year they work, they get half a year, basically for their retirement, right? Assuming like no inflation, no returns. They work a year, they get half a year. The other person who is making the same amount of money but spends $50,000, they put away $50,000 every year. So instead of getting half a year, they get a full year every year. And, if you drop that, you can drop that more and more and more, where, if somebody is then only spending $33,000 a year and they're putting away 66, then every year they work, they get 2 years, right? And so if your goal is to retire very quickly, it's not really about the income, it's really more about the expenditure. And obviously there's a floor on spending, right? Like the cheapest apartment, the cheapest car, there's all like a bare minimum price threshold you do have to cross. So I'm not saying income doesn't matter, but what I am saying is I have colleagues, right? And they're making a lot of money, especially for our age. And some of them are spending $5,000 a month on rent. And I'm like, that's number one, more than most people make every year. And number two, I'm just thinking to myself, you're working like a dog and you're making all this money, but you're spending every last penny. Like a lot of my colleagues, they live paycheck to paycheck, even though they're making like top 1% earnings for their age. And I just think to myself, like, don't you understand that, number one, if you have financial goals, you're not going to meet them. And number two, you're going to be working like this for like a very long time. Like if you get used to a level of lifestyle that's this high, number one, like it's going to be devastating if you ever have to take a job that pays less. But number two, it's going to take you so long to be able to retire if you're not willing to cut your standard of life. So I think that's absolutely crazy. And, I'm going to go into a ton more detail on this, but it's just crazy to me to see people living not even above their means. They're technically living in their means, I guess. Like they're not borrowing money, but it's just nuts how much they spend. And That's not the way I operate. So anyway, I'm not saying don't spend any money. Obviously, you should probably have a social life, and that requires a little bit of, spending. But, if you're really trying to retire early, it's not about getting rich quick. It's not about, crypto or whatever. That stuff is so risky. If you want to beat inflation and you want like the least risky way to increase your odds of retirement, if that's your goal, nothing beats dropping your spending. Nothing even comes close in terms of the amount of impact that has immediately on a risk-free basis. And as long as you don't adjust upwards your spending, it's an impact that lasts your entire life. And it's so powerful, and people just don't understand it. So I think I'm going to do a video where I kind of, talk a little bit more about data. Like I've looked at the spending rate of, different income percentiles, kind of where those percentiles line up, what that means people are actually saving, what that implies for retirement, stuff like that. I'm going to make a video on it. It might be a long video. I might have to cut that one up into multiple videos. But I don't know. This is just something that, I've always been very sensitive to ever since I was very young. But it's only now that I'm a little older and, I have like a couple years of work experience under my belt, and I've kind of seen how things play out in the real world, that I'm really starting to understand just how powerful dropping your spending is in terms of financial freedom. So anyway, probably going to make a video on that soon. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.